Welcome to Old Fashioned Finance, the podcast that mixes cocktails and high finance. I'm your host, Caleb Frankert, and I'm joined by my good friend and fellow money muddler, Jason Burnell.
Caleb, can a podcast about finance be entertaining?
You know it. I mean, with alcohol, of course.
Yes! Let's mix it up!
Oh, how's it going?
All right. It's good.
Good.
It's good. I'm
been,
happy.
It's been a few weeks. Well, a couple weeks at least since we've done this.
Yeah, I know. I feel a little rusty.
We
need the
It's going to
excitement
be
level
very
to go up a little
apparent.
bit. Maybe we should pause and go outside and scream or something.
Nah.
It'll be all right. Nah, it's good.
Cool. So, Jason, we've got a good one. 401k loans. I've been hearing the topic actually come up a little bit more frequently here.
Interest
lately.
rates.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah. So
They're at all-time highs, right? Interest rates?
No.
All-time highs.
No.
We've never been here before.
Inflation's close to
Pretty high.
Well, not even all time.
No, it's not.
Inflation's getting up. Anyway, that's not the point of this podcast. Not today, at least. So,
Sorry, I was just trying to put a little fear in our listeners.
Jason, we're drinking a new cocktail too. I've never had it. I've decided I really like when we try something totally new because we don't try it at all until we're on microphone and we get a real general reaction out of it.
Yeah, but the thing about this too is we pretty much have these ingredients laying around. We're just mixing it up a little different.
Well, I would say this is an easy one. If you, I don't know if it was last episode or a couple episodes past, we used Benedictine, which is not a staple that everybody has laying around, but
we told them to buy a bottle.
This is true. So if you have
everybody
a bottle
listens,
of it, and you're going, how the heck am I going to drink a whole bottle of Benedictine ever? Well, here's another opportunity.
We've been asking ourselves the same question.
It's been sitting there a while. So the drink today is called the Frisco.
Frisco.
It reminds me of Fresco. I don't know.
Yeah, it does.
But it sounds refreshing and crisp.
It does. Italian?
So
I mean,
could be.
maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I would think so. Whatever. We don't know anything.
So the Frisco and 401k loans, this should be a pretty fun one, Jason. Let's get into how to mix up this here cocktail.
All right.
So the Frisco is made up of really 3 ingredients. We've got 2 ounces of rye whiskey, a half an ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice, and a half ounce of that Benedictine that we just talked about. So I'm going to reiterate something here, and this is when we call for lemon juice, I'm going fresh lemon juice.
Yeah.
If you are in a pinch and you use that lemon juice that you might use for baking, like cheesecakes and stuff like that in the store, it's not the same.
You'll know the difference.
It's sickly sweet, actually, in a drink, in my opinion.
I don't know if it's the citric acid or something. It just doesn't mix well.
I don't think it's intended use as cocktails, and if you're making a judgment on a cocktail while using that, it's probably not fair. So we're going to always opt for fresh squeezed lemon.
I've done the same thing with lime, too. It is just, it's not the same.
It's definitely
I would
not.
rather use a 2-week-old lime that's kind of questionable over that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the juices, the lime juice especially is overly sweetened.
Oof.
So so anyway, pretty easy one. I made this in a shaker, threw some ice cubes in, put the ingredients in, shook it up, strained it, and then I did garnish with a lemon peel, fresh lemon peel, which smells delightful.
It's really pretty looking.
It is.
So, all right.
You want to try it out?
I do.
Okay. Cheers, Jason.
High expectations. All right. Here we go. That's great.
Whoa.
Very lemony.
Ooh.
That's good. But I like lemon. I'm surprised that usually we're kind of anti-lemon in cocktails. I like that.
I'm, sour.
I'm getting more.
Yeah, there it is. Right? Did you? Okay.
What the heck?
So whenever I pause there for a second, then you just got it just now. There's 2. I'm gonna go in for a second sip because there are 2 parts to this. There are 2 parts.
Oh wow.
There it is. So yeah, it's almost all lemon juice up front,
but it's warm at the end. There's
definitely.
I think that Benedictine's coming through.
And we're drinking rye whiskey here. Let's not forget.
I guess maybe that's the tickle we're getting.
I don't taste the rye a whole heck of a lot. No, I think I just used regular old Overholt, which is not standout. It's just it's bottom shelf rye.
Yeah, but I mean you're not getting that rye up front.
No, you don't get the. I kind of.
It's very lemon.
Yes, it's almost like lemonade up front, quite honestly, because there's the sugary, sour, but then I think the Benedictine kind of rolls in, and
at
then,
the end,
you get that little honey.
It's like the afterburn.
It's very interesting, but there are 2, in my opinion, 2 distinct parts of this drink. The
It took-
upfront and then the...
It took 5 solid seconds for that to show up for me on the first sip. That's pretty cool.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. No, this is a you should try at home.
I'd say it's a good summer sipper for sure.
Come visit us.
The colder the better on this one, but yeah, that's interesting for a very simple drink. 3 ingredients.
Yeah.
It's got a weird complexity to it.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
All right, okay. I could
Lemon in a
put this-
cocktail.
Put this on the list of things that we make here.
I mean, the Preakness, that was the drink we did a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
That was very similar.
I like
And,
that.
yeah,
That was very
so-
Manhattan-y, though. This is less. It's got some of the same ingredients. The lemon juice is the big difference here, though,
Yeah,
really, because this is not even. I wouldn't even put this in the Manhattan category. Not even close.
No, not at all. So if you're thinking like Manhattan level stuff here, it's not.
But the ingredients
lemon.
are very similar.
I know,
very similar.
But this is cool.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Awesome.
It's a good change of pace. We'll put it that way.
Yes. Go summer.
Here we are.
All right.
Okay, hey, 401k loans, Jason. You probably have some initial opinions, an initial visceral reaction. I know I do. But like everything that we do here, I like to dive in a little bit and give everything, a fair shot whenever we research it. And, going back into times that we've talked about these with our clients and things like that, I like to draw on a lot of experience, but also I like to see both sides of things. So my initial reaction is very visceral. I go, ooh, no, 401k loan, bad idea.
Right.
But let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talk about the basic concepts, how they work, and then we'll jump into pros and cons and kind of like is becoming our norm here.
Right.
Good or bad, for it, again it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of these. It is one of those concepts that I think somebody walks into their HR department at their company, or they get on the old 401k website to get an expert opinion. 401k loans come up oftentimes as an option. There's a lot of considerations. Usually, your motivation when you're looking for a way to borrow money, and maybe have exhausted other methods of borrowing, you really got to take a deep breath here before you jump into a decision like a 401k loan.
So what I'm going to say there is your initial reaction is similar to most financial planners' initial reactions. I want to challenge that just a little bit here, and I'm not going to spoil it and say, I'm good. These are good. I'm for it. But, there might be some merit. So we're not going to just throw things out without giving it consideration here. I know my initial response is like yours. It's a very polarizing conversation, I think. But let's get into the basics of how this works. So the concept generally is you need some fast cash, probably.
Checking the cash.
So a better alternative than that, yes. So let's talk about how this generally works. It's basically borrowing against the value of your 401k. You're paying an interest rate back to your 401k. So I think the people who are pro 401k loans say, "Oh, but it's not. You're not really paying interest. You're paying yourself." Okay, I get that.
Sure.
So we'll look at both sides of that. But the way this works is generally you're looking at an interest rate of, let's say, 1% to 2% over the going prime rate. That's pretty standard for 401k loans, which is in general pretty decent, right? Similar to home equity loans and things like that.
Yeah, you'd be okay with that if you walked into the bank.
Sure, absolutely.
They're like, here, we're going to give you a loan as prime plus 1.
Okay, so from a rate standpoint, not a terrible option from a rate standpoint, okay? Right. Let's talk about some of the details. Typically, you're looking at $50,000 or 50% of the account value, whichever is less.
Yeah, so you can't go into your 401k and just tear the whole thing out and go buy a house. I mean, it's not the way it works.
There were some changes made with, I don't know if it was Secure Act. Some things changed a little bit. Things changed a little bit with all the COVID relief. I think we're through that. We're past that. That stuff has expired. But yeah, at this point, the way it stands, it's the lesser of $50,000 or 50% that you can borrow from your 401k.
Correct.
And as far as the interest, yes, there's interest calculated. There is a payment schedule, no more than 5 years typically, and that interest is paid back into the 401k. So you're putting back more than what you're taking out, but it's also going into the 401k.
Yeah, so like in a crafty way, lending whenever made easy, and almost the same concept as a 401k contribution, right? You just don't really realize it's happening. this has been crafted in a way that allows you to not really know you're making the payment. It just comes out of your paycheck.
Yeah.
And you're just going to make the payment that way. And depending on how much you take, I mean, the payment on 5 years on $50,000 is not going to be gigantic.
And for a lot of people, the way that they look at this is, well, I was already putting money into my 401k, so I'll be putting money into my 401k. I'm just putting it back.
Exactly.
So, and that'll take us down that rabbit hole, of course, of timing and things like that. And in a lot of regards here, I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. When it comes to timing of all of this, like a lot of things that we talk about, depends on how things go, whether it's a good idea or not.
Sure.
But so let's get into kind of listing out some of the pros and cons here, Jason. I will speak to the pros here. Again, this is not necessarily my opinion, but let's just talk objectively. Some of the pros of a 401k loan. So you're paying yourself back, but you're paying you back.
You're your bank.
Right. Yeah, you're lending to yourself, you're paying yourself back. So, okay, can get behind that. One of the big perks of this, obviously, is that it's a non-taxable event. So you can withdraw the money, essentially.
Don't get ahead.
And I've got on there, not a taxable event.
I'm having a hard time holding back.
Unless, ... Okay?
Exactly.
So, yeah, initially not a taxable event, so you can pull the money out, which would normally be, so if you had a hardship withdrawal or something like that, or just a plain withdrawal from your 401k, taxable event.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal for folks.
Absolutely. So I would put that in the pros column for sure.
Yeah.
But we're going to come back because this also ends up on the con side.
Right. Exactly.
Here's a pro that I never really considered, okay? And that is credit not being an issue.
Yeah. So this is one of the thoughts that I when I start going through a situation, if you have very little credit, if you have a record of having bad credit, it's probably lending altogether is a bad idea. But I was thinking, someone young, maybe 22, 23 years old, just starting off, need to get access for, a reason without credit. It makes sense. I could see how that could be beneficial.
Yeah, nobody's going to decline a 401k loan because you have poor credit history.
You're not going to ask anybody. It just has to be part of your rules in your 401k plan. It's either allowed or it's not.
So there's that. Credit's not an issue. Now, if that's not an issue in general, obviously that doesn't apply here. Here's where another thing, I didn't write this down, but kind of along with credit not being an issue, debt ratios are not an issue either.
Nope, not at all. So whether you can afford it or not isn't really a consideration.
Exactly. And honestly, okay, so let's talk to the merit of it, right? Let's say maybe you're in the process of buying a house and you need to keep an eye on your debt to income, but you also need 401k. You need a loan for something else. Here's something that's not going to throw those numbers off because it's technically not a loan. I am biting
my arm so hard right now.
I know you are.
I am. We
We
are not very far into this, and I'm starting to lose it.
It might sound like I'm super for it. Okay,
I know you're not. I just
want to speak to the merit on both sides because I know, to be fair, I have been vehemently opposed to 401k loans.
Yes,
absolutely. But maybe a little bit more merit to it than what I am willing to generally talk about. So. Another pro to this would be flexibility of the payback.
Sure.
Obviously, if you don't pay, you still have to pay over that 5-year period, but you're able to stop and not make payments at some point, depending on how your plan is set up. But
and it's gonna be done. I mean, it's a pretty short payback. So if you
if I can take anything away, if you do one of these, the shorter the payback, the better. Please.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, you might want to consider accelerating your contributions to help pay it back faster.
So we've talked a little bit about the pros. Okay, now
we got through it.
We got through that.
I'm having a hard time.
Let's jump into the cons. And Jason, the first one I have listed here is, despite all of the pros, let's talk about opportunity cost, Jason, because we can talk about the interest rate and paying yourself back and not paying taxes, and these are all costs that we don't have to worry about. But there is a cost, right,
Correct.
to everything that you do, and opportunity cost is important, and we need to talk about that. Explain a little bit. Taking the money out and missing out on money in the 401k working for you. Talk a little bit about the opportunity cost involved, and I'm unleashing you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you are paying yourself an interest rate, but you're missing out on market growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, entirely for 5 years on the loan amount. It is just so sad. It's like paying double the interest from my perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not double mathematically.
No.
Just-
I mean, but I think sometimes, I mean, those like non-mathematical, analogies, like you should just think, if I take a 401k loan out, this is going to cost me not what I'm paying myself back, but like double in my mind, because you are missing the compounding effect of all the dollars.
Yeah.
You're missing the market growth. And quite frankly, over a period of 5 years, if you're anywhere within the next 15, 20 years of retirement, that will have a significant impact on your situation.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Jason.
Here we go.
And say, okay, so what if you take a 401k out, a 401k loan out, and then the market drops?
Yeah.
And you're paying your back slowly. So this is one of those depends. Hey, sometimes it can work out a little bit in your favor here, right?
Yeah, because we know that most people are exceptionally good at market timing and know exactly when to do this. And yeah, that's just not a good way. And I mean, I even want to back up like cons, like, why do you need this money? Okay, like we didn't really talk about that. And I'm sorry. I mean, I've talked to a few young people over the last few weeks, and it's like, slow down. Okay, this isn't the last opportunity to buy a motorcycle 2022 Harley Davidson that'll ever exist in your lifetime. Just stop. And, I think oftentimes we paint ourselves into the corner, and I can't take it.
Yeah.
All right. There are other options like not doing anything.
Yeah. Well, you know what, though? We live in the United States of America, and we want instant gratification. So being patient and saving up, is not something typically we want to do, especially if we've got this great benefit of a 401k loan.
Yeah,
right?
But financial irresponsibility will not be endorsed on this podcast.
This aggression will not stand.
It will not stand. And I think a lot of times we just put ourselves in that situation where we think it is impossible for there to be another choice. So
that's the impatience part, right?
Yeah.
Which may be a reason that somebody looks at a 401k loan.
So not only are you going to miss out on market growth, you really got to ask yourself those questions. So and there's more.
On top of that, Jason, not only are you missing out on market growth, okay, but also while you're paying yourself back, in a lot of cases, the way that these are structured, you look at your plan, you aren't able to technically make other or additional contributions until that loan is paid back, right?
It's like everything stops for that
Which
period of time.
affects what else? The match from your employer.
Absolutely.
And so we talk about the match from your employer being free money. Yeah. So yeah, there you go,
like
right?
Real free money, not
real
like,
free money.
Yeah, exactly.
So okay, yeah, you might, looking at the pros, you might say, okay, this sounds pretty good. And then the opportunity cost thing, you can say, it does depend on what the markets do. Although we know that the markets usually go up, right?
Yeah.
But also the fact that you may not be able to make additional contributions and missing out on the free money match, the free money, which also benefits from compounding, right?
Right. Exactly.
That's in my opinion, that's the biggest reason. I'm going to spoil it, that I'm usually again it.
Well, and I think we don't want to be short-sighted here. If the market's doing poorly and you think, I just need to get some money out, I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to buy, guns and water. Like, okay, I can't solve that problem. But if you're very short-sighted and you think the market is not going to come back, I mean, if you put a 5-year time frame on this payback, odds on a diversified portfolio of you coming back are so high. Okay?
Absolutely.
It would be so unprecedented over a 5-year period of time that it won't come back. You got to just set that aside and focus on the prudent side of investing. Your time frame is huge.
So looking at cold hard averages, which I like to do, right? And I've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks with folks.
For
my
some
job,
weird reason.
Well, yeah, the market's doing its thing, right? I have to be cold, hard, and dead to emotion when it comes to money. It's part of my job. It's part of good advice, right?
Right.
To try to take the emotion out of it. So let's look at the cold, hard, dead statistics, right? The emotionless statistics. Over a 5-year period, the S&P 500's got about an 80% chance of being positive. So,
right.
Could it work out in your favor? It might, but let's be honest. That's in nobody's favor anyway, if we're looking at that 20%. You are
betting on the 20%.
Right.
At that point.
You're rooting for the rest of the money in your 401k to go down.
Some people love doing that. So
That's
if you're Eeyore and you think the sky's falling, go for it, I guess. But
my belief is the market usually goes up, and so when we go through times like we are right now, and I like to keep these episodes as evergreen as possible, but that just to me, I say, okay, great. We're going to get it out of the way and we can get on with it where the market usually goes up again, because it will. But yeah, for me, not being able to make additional contributions, taking money out of the mix that's missing out on compounding, that is the biggest reason that I am not generally a fan. But there are some other things to be aware of, and you and I have experienced this.
This is a massive landmine.
Yeah, this is we're going to tag on to the pro, which is not a taxable event unless ... Let's get into the ... You and I have seen this when we meet with a new client and we're talking about financial planning and rolling over a 401k, and we get that, hold up a second, wait a minute.
Yep. We have an outstanding 401k.
We have an outstanding loan.
Yep. They switched their jobs. Mm-hmm. They had a loan, and the piper's piping.
Yeah.
It's time to pay it back. And not only are you going to pay it back from your 401k balance, it's all going to be taxable.
Immediately.
And there is no takesy-backsies.
Yeah, and not only taxes, but if you're under 59.5, we get the 10% penalty on top of that too.
It's an extra special. I mean, 40%, guys. I mean, depending on your state.
Yeah.
It's a good number to look at. And not only is it taxable and a penalty, it's added on. Maybe you got a great promotion in your new job and you're making more money. Now you might be in a couple different tax bracket situation because of this $50,000 loan, and you paid it down to $41,000, and you decided to leave a job, and you were focused on the money, and quite frankly, you better be able to pay the taxes that are due. I mean, it's just, or else it's going to be worse.
Well, and here's the deal, right? Because you can look at this a couple of ways and say, there are some pros here, right? If you take this idea and you compare it to going out and getting, let's say, an equity line with a bank or a personal loan, even something with a decent interest rate, well, cost-wise, let's not even consider the opportunity cost, but cost-wise, could it be a cheaper, quote-unquote, lending option? Yes, absolutely. But the risk of a job change or a firing or anything that could cause that to be taxable and due immediately, right? Unless you have the check to write to your 401k to pay that. But if that were the case, you're probably not borrowing against your 401k, right?
Exactly. And most people, again, in this, we just use my example of you finding a new job. Mm-hmm. What if you get laid off?
Yeah.
The same thing applies. So going into a financially kind of hard period of time where you're looking for a new job and you might be unemployed, the piper comes piping.
And just to be that guy, I'm going to push my glasses up and go, actually, well, you said layoff, but we're talking about like a firing situation. You don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, guess what? We're going to kick you while you're down.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to pay taxes and a penalty on this money that you borrowed, you better be able to front it. Well, that's not easier said than done when you don't have a job.
Yeah, and right? I can't. I mean, I think we've seen clients, we've been in situations where it's like a lot of financial pressure. Mm-hmm. Those are things that, cause you when you go to a job interview, you need a job, something happened at your old job, and you change. Mm-hmm. You're going to accept positions you don't want, maybe less money, maybe doing things you don't like. When you add this on top, man, that's rough.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. This, like anything else, I say this when I talk about a lot of different things that are available and are quote unquote approved or whatever. We talk about the brokerage side of things all the time too, like annuities and insurance products and things of that nature. Is it completely evil and never a good idea for everyone? Well,
yes.
No. Jason says yes. I say if there's no merit whatsoever, it wouldn't be allowed. However, there are cases. And I would say, we could lump all this stuff together and say, usually there's a better way of doing it. And I would say the same thing with 401k loans. This is why we have sinking funds. This is why we stay out of debt in the first place. This is why we have a well-established emergency fund. You can't miss out on the blocking and tackling, the budgeting, the savings, the emergency funds, the sinking funds, those types of things.
You would have to, the amount of convincing it would take for me to endorse this. It would be like a 2-car household sells a car. Your camper's gone. You canceled every Netflix, Hulu.
Yeah.
You canceled a cell phone. Like, I would want you
and the gym membership.
Totally convince me that this was the only option that I would. Gosh, it would be so hard. And you mentioned something. I want to just say this. I work with a lot of small business owners, lots, and we design 401k plans. Every 401k plan I design does not have a loan provision.
I was waiting for you to say that because you've been jumping out of your chair here.
I'm like,
to speak
my
against
legs
it.
are shaking.
Yeah. Is there some merit? Yes. Can it be used effectively? Sometimes, maybe, in just that right circumstance, right? And I'll throw an example out there, okay? But we'll talk about both sides here, and I know we're running short on time, but let's say it's a house situation. You need a down payment. You can't take a gift because that might affect your financing. You can't take another loan because that affects your debt-to-income ratio. This is not a loan. It's an asset. Can you swing a down payment from your 401k? Yeah, you might be able to. Is that dangerous? Is it irresponsible? Is it impatient? Yeah, probably.
Rent.
Yeah. Hey, there are a lot worse things than renting. Yeah. There are many days I feel like I wish I was renting, right? Home ownership.
Yeah. I mean, it's just simply rent for me. And it's really hard to predict 6 months out. You know that. Like especially in a situation where you're like newly married or you're moving, like, man, just take a breath, slow down.
Yep.
Rent for 6 months. It may not be the best situation. Live in your parents' basement. They love you. They'll let you come back. Not my kids, but
the cats need company anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so important that you really don't put yourself in a corner and say that is the only possibility.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise. We're very debt averse here. So like any loan, I would say there's a better way typically.
Almost always.
Now that doesn't mean that I can never sit across from a client and say, you should never ever get a loan for anything. I get it.
Right.
But again, this should not be what we see. And actually I saw a statistic out there that was pretty surprising. 19% of employers who have this available, I think it was in 2016, have a 401k loan.
I believe it.
That's a lot.
I mean,
that's a lot.
Even in the plans that I've helped design, when we don't have a 401k loan, there's almost always someone that doesn't believe us and tries to get one. And I mean, hardship withdrawals are a thing.
Yeah.
That's a possibility, but it
might be a better possibility. It might be a better option, actually, when it all boils down to it.
I'm just saying, like, in most cases, if you have it as an employer, someone's going to use it, and you're going to be in a situation when they leave, they won't be happy. They won't understand. You didn't explain it.
Yeah.
You're not an expert on this. So let's just steer clear of it altogether.
All right. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Jason, good or bad?
Terrible.
For it or against it?
For it.
Oh, you're for it? Okay.
I'm for it being bad.
I'm mostly against it.
I'm against it. All
in most cases against it. So
thanks for it.
Jason just changed his mind. He's totally for it.
No.
Thanks for having a drink with us this week. It's time to close out the tab. If you have a question or a topic you want addressed on the Old Fashioned Finance Podcast, be sure to email us at podcast@bluejfg.com. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to share the show with someone you love or just someone who needs a little money muddling themselves. You can stay up to date with the latest action by following us on Facebook. Old Fashioned Finance is brought to you by Blue Jay Financial Group, that's bluejfg.com, and produced by Podastery Studios. We've been your hosts, Caleb and Jason. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
Blue Jay Financial Group, LLC. Blue Jay is a registered investment advisor registered with the state of Ohio. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The presence of this advertisement on this podcast shall not be directly or indirectly interpreted as a solicitation of investment advisory services to persons of another jurisdiction unless otherwise permitted by statute. Follow-up or individualized responses to a consumer in a particular state by Blue Jay and the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation shall not be made without first complying with jurisdiction requirements or pursuant an applicable state exemption. All verbal and written consent on this presentation is for information purposes only. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Blue Jay unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to other parties' informational accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with an advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation.